You're listening to the Visible Expert Podcast, where we share stories, research, and actionable insights to help B2B marketers and practitioners drive extraordinary growth in their professional lives. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Visible Expert Podcast. I'm John Tyerman.
And I'm Kelly Waffle.
And we have an excellent interview today for you. Henry Schuck, who's the CEO of DiscoverOrg and now ZoomInfo after their recent acquisition. So, Kelly, what did you think of our chat with Henry?
You know, as I told Henry during the interview, his background is just hard to beat. Just the amount of experience he's acquired, during his 20s and into his 30s. He's gone through bootstrapping a company and then dealing with raising money, going out and getting capital, doing some mergers and acquisitions. So he's done quite a bit in his role as CEO that a lot of other CEOs haven't even done yet. What did you think of some of that?
I thought that what he was talking about is your CRM data out of date and how quickly that data gets updated. I thought that was really something, a light bulb kind of went off in my head when he was talking about that.
I saw that, yeah.
Well, you guys were, going back and forth, and I was just amazed at that conversation. But the one big thing that I took away was when Henry said, you need to be continuously learning, and if you're doing the same thing week over week and you're not continuously learning, you're dead. Yeah, and I thought that was really powerful. It's
hard for your company to grow like that. The thing that I saw that I know a lot of people will appreciate was around how DiscoverOrg is handling the customer success process. So talk about a light bulb going off. Henry was walking around the office one day, and he came across a situation that got him thinking about how they do customer success, and that led to a program or a process they developed building out what they call a customer development rep, very similar to what sales teams do with SDRs. So you'll have to listen to get more details on it, but I think it's a very clever way to handle customer success, the customer experience, and make sure that your people are getting in front of your clients and your customers a lot more than they are today.
Well said. So
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if you're listening to this, we asked Henry, about his background, about how he's handling the recent merger, how that's impacting his sales and branding and websites and marketing. So this is a great interview for you to listen to, and so I'm really excited to share that with you. But before we dive in, let's have a word from our sponsors. So this episode is sponsored by the Hinge Research Institute. If you're involved in marketing demand or lead generation and want to use a data-driven approach to content strategy, consider using Original Research. The Hinge Research Institute offers a range of services from tiered sponsorships of original studies to custom research on specific industry challenges. And we found that high-growth professional services firms are 3 times more likely than no-growth firms to use original research in their content strategy. And, according to Forbes, companies who adopt a data-driven approach to marketing are 6 times more likely to be profitable year over year. If you're interested in learning more, email us at research@hingemarketing.com and we'll find the right approach to using original research for you. All right. On that note, let's dive right into our interview with Henry.
Our guest today is Henry Schuck, CEO and founder of DiscoverOrg and also CEO of ZoomInfo. DiscoverOrg is a marketing and sales intelligence provider that connects growth-bound companies directly to their ideal prospects, creating a fast track to decision makers by providing direct dial phone numbers, verified email addresses, and department-level org charts. Welcome to the podcast, Henry.
Thank you for having me here.
Henry, here at Hinge, we define recognized CEOs and influencers in the B2B space who share their expertise as visible experts. And this podcast is really focused on sharing the stories of our guests and illuminating their journeys to building expertise and a personal brand. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey from starting and selling Redline Promotions to becoming a lawyer to acquiring ZoomInfo earlier this year?
Sure. So I went to college in Las Vegas at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and after my first year in the dorms, I had to move and find a place to live. I had no money. I had no college fund or anything like that, so I started looking for a job, and I found a job at a company called iProfile. And at the time, it was a one-person, founder-led business providing sales intelligence to technology vendors. And I didn't know what that meant. I remember the first day at the company, he said, hey, go identify the vice presidents of information technology at these 10 companies, because that's who our customers want to sell to. And I remember thinking, the vice presidents? I thought there was just a president and a vice president. Like, my only context for business was the political world of, one president, one vice president. And so I worked there actually for 5 years, from 2001 to 2006, and we grew the business from about $300,000 in revenue up to about $5 million in revenue before I left. And I left and I went to law school because we weren't really building a business. We had $5 million in revenue. It was 3 employees, and 2 of them were part-time college kids. So there wasn't much of a business there, but you could see that the idea was resonating with the market. So I went to law school, and 1 year in, one of my friends called me and said, hey, I want to start a business that's kind of like iProfile, but doesn't directly compete. We launched it in 2007. We bootstrapped it, so we grew organically, put $25,000 each on our credit cards, started growing, had our first customer before the end of the year, had a pretty good first year of revenue growth, and then continued to just grow it organically from 2007 through 2014. And in 2014, we brought in an outside investor with TA Associates. We went out and made a couple acquisitions. Our first one was of iProfile, who had been around in this space, but we had an opportunity to acquire them and integrate the businesses. So we kind of got our teeth wet on that, and then we acquired another competitor in the space named Rainy King at the end of 2017, and then in 2019, in February, we acquired ZoomInfo.
Yeah, so it sounds like you went full circle there with iProfile.
Yeah, it was an interesting. It was a personally fun acquisition because it really was my first job out in college. It helped me learn the industry. And then it was owned by a private equity firm that kind of struggled to put its arms around the business, and we were in a perfect position to leverage what we had learned and what I had learned at the business to drive it forward.
Hey, Henry, if you don't mind, let's go a little bit deeper into DiscoverOrg's recent acquisition of ZoomInfo. Beyond significantly increasing your addressable market, what was the appeal of the acquisition? I've heard it said that it now enables you to provide the data trifecta of quality, depth, and quantity.
Yeah, so I'll tell you what was happening here. It's actually a really interesting story because if you went back 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, the perception of who ZoomInfo was a low-quality data provider. And so from a competitive perspective, we really didn't see ZoomInfo in the market 4 years ago. It was what felt like a low-end player. And then what happened over those 4 years is, first, DiscoverOrg was focused on providing really high-quality data on specific departments within a corporation, so IT, marketing, HR, and specific companies, generally companies that were more than 500 employees. So we were really focused on the mid-market and enterprise. Mm-hmm. And we didn't really see ZoomInfo around. And then about 2.5 years ago, things started to change. You started hearing more about how many direct dial phone numbers ZoomInfo had. You started hearing more about how the quality of the information that they were collecting was better than it had been before. And I kind of thought of it as just noise. And I remember distinctly going in, I took a trip to Utah and I visited 4 clients in the Salt Lake area. And every single one of them that I visited said, hey, look, we love DiscoverOrg's data for our enterprise and our mid-market teams, but your data is just not broad enough for our SMB teams. And I have 50 SMB reps, and they don't have a data source to get access to so that they can understand their customers and their prospects. And so we bought ZoomInfo. And by the way, after we bought it, it's pretty good. Like, the reps are not saying that the quality is that much less than what DiscoverOrg is. Now, look, objectively, it is. The ZoomInfo quality was objectively less than DiscoverOrg. And really, it's hard to have 95% quality guarantees when you're doing it across 100 million contacts and 18 million records. But it was good and good enough. And I remember walking away from those meetings going like, oh, we're in trouble. Because this stuff is good, and it's in all of our accounts because we don't have the broad coverage. So it's a much easier play for them to go, hey, you need one tool, let's move up into your enterprise and mid-market, and kind of bump DiscoverOrg aside.
Uh-huh.
And so number one, I view that like that's a true competitive threat. It is providing a different value. It was providing a different value proposition because it had been focused at the time on SMB, but it was a real competitive threat. I remember I went back to my office, and our TA associate is a client of ZoomInfo, and I said, I got on a meeting share. I said, show me ZoomInfo, show me the platform. Like, fire up a meeting, let me see it. And we were going through. I spent an hour writing down names and checking the phone numbers and writing down emails. I remember just sitting in my office, like, sweating, like actually sweating, and thinking, okay, I need a game plan for this. This is going to cause us an issue. We actually went out and we built a much broader offering within the DiscoverOrg platform over the next few months. So we took our platform from selling 5 million records on people to selling 25 million records over a really short period of time. And that felt good. It was like, okay, we're in the game. We're not going to lose the coverage. I'm not going to lose the coverage battle that, as often as we would have had we not built this. But it was clear that companies wanted coverage. They wanted accuracy. They wanted quality. From DiscoverOrg, they also wanted org charts, and they wanted scoops or projects and initiatives that were happening in companies and executive moves. But then they really needed a broad set of data on all of their customers, all the way downstream, and all the buying professionals within the companies they were selling to. And we just didn't have that missing piece. And so we said, look, here's a company that has an incredible technology, incredible data, is growing almost 100% a year. Imagine if we could combine these two things. You could really take quality and quantity and put those two things together and then surround it with depth on each of those accounts. That is what every salesperson and every marketer wants to be able to go to market with. Like, let's have that solution for the market. And that's how it came to be. We have to convince investors and my board along the way, but that's how it happened.
So, Henry, you mentioned that ZoomInfo was not your first acquisition. You mentioned acquiring iProfile and RainKing. Are you looking to acquire other companies? And if so, how does mergers and acquisitions fit into your overall growth strategy?
I think we're always looking for different technologies and tools that are in our space that provide something of value across our customer base and for our customers. And if there's an opportunity to take something in the market today, make it our own, put our heavy engineering resources on it to perfect whatever technology it is and then take it to market, I think that's a really interesting strategy. I will say for the time being, my hands are pretty full with ZoomInfo, and but we have a healthy M&A pipeline. We're constantly looking at potential acquisitions.
Interesting. So if we could drill a little bit deeper into the whole concept of merger and acquisition, how does an activity like that impact your branding strategy? For example, your overall identity, how you handle websites. Do you keep different sales teams? How do you handle marketing? In the end, Is your strategy to be a branded house or to be a house of brands?
Yeah, great question. It is to be a branded house.
Okay.
Now, there's a period of time where you don't really, depending on the acquisition, there's a period of time you don't get that. So I'll give you the ranking example, and I'll give you the ZoomInfo example. The ranking example, we went in on August 28th and made that acquisition. And we said, look, close out, you have 60 days to close out all of your deals. You can sell those deals on whatever you want. You can sell them on the DiscoverOrg platform, or you can sell them on the ranking platform. But at the end of the 60 days, you will only be selling on the DiscoverOrg platform. But you've got deals and opportunities that are currently in flux and are currently being worked. We're not going to confuse that world by introducing DiscoverOrg and starting the whole sales cycle over. So 60 days, and that's it. During that period of time, we immediately redirected the website, the ranking website, to DiscoverOrg because we knew that the ranking website wasn't going to be an ongoing concern. So if you went to ranking the day after the acquisition or a week after the acquisition, you were routed to the DiscoverOrg website.
Okay.
We knew that was happening. That was the same thing we did with iProfile. Now with ZoomInfo was a little bit different because what we said was, look, we have 25 customers on the DiscoverOrg platform. ZoomInfo has 11,000 customers on their platform. Neither of these things are going away anytime soon. And so they're two really great platforms, and we're going to continue to sell them and market them individually until we build a unique, differentiated platform that we can go to market with. We said, look, I think we can build that in 6 months from acquisition day. And so we did. So we went off, and the engineers on both sides were singularly focused on building this new platform. We released that internally into beta customers at the beginning of August. And in September, and then let me say, in the meantime, while we're building this, we're building the new sales organization. How does the sales organization become one? How does the marketing organization we put together as one right away? The sales orgs, because they were both still selling their own solutions, we took a little bit more time to figure out, well, who's going to run the different sales forces, how are they going to roll up. Mm-hmm. We actually made those changes in July, and so now the sales forces are under one umbrella. And then in September, they'll all be selling one solution. They'll all be going to market with one new platform solution.
Very interesting. Henry, more and more of marketers are realizing that data is really the key ingredient to optimizing their marketing automation, account-based marketing efforts, and other campaigns. So what are some of the other ways that marketing and sales teams are using your data outside of those that I mentioned?
Yeah, first of all, duh. Like, of course it is. Like, of course it is. How can you go to market in today's world without data on your customers and prospects? It's an insane thought to not have a solution like this in your tech stack. Because if you don't, all you're doing is relying on expensive sales reps' Rolodexes and assuming that those are going to somehow magically appear in your CRM and marketing automation tools. And then assuming that the rep is somehow going to go in there and make updates and changes to those records every time a company grows or shrinks or it's untenable that that's the way you could go to market today. It just doesn't make sense. What you want, if you're a marketer or a salesperson, is the ability to holistically look at the market and then pick and choose where you're going to go. So, for example, for us, what you're able to do with the ZoomInfo data is take a look at, let's say, the country. You can say, show me all the companies in the country that have over 500 employees, that are using Salesforce and Marketo, that have gotten funding of over $10 million in the last 12 months, that have added a CFO in the last 12 months. Show me all of those companies, and then show me the ones that have an initiative to spend money on sales intelligence in the next 12 months. Show me those companies now. And then on those companies, show me the VPs of sales, the directors of sales, the directors of inside sales, the VPs of marketing, the directors of marketing, and that's my universe right now. And then in real time, I want to know when these companies start, when these companies are doing research on the internet on topics that are relevant to me. So show me when these companies start serving on sales leads or sales management or lead generation, because then I'm going to put that data back into play so that I move these companies up the ranking to get in touch with. And that, I think, to date has been like a magic elixir nobody could get. It was like, yeah, I want to go to market like that, but I have to cobble together a whole bunch of different solutions to get there. And in today's world, you can do that with one solution. With ZoomInfo, you can go to market that way. And to me, it just doesn't seem smart to go to market any other way. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that I think is happening is Salesforce has been around since, Salesforce.com as a CRM has been around since 1998 or 1999. And companies bought Salesforce on this premise that it was going to digitally transform their businesses. And if you just go back 10 years, most of the companies that have over, call it 500 employees, the vast majority of those have been around since 2000, at least 2009. All of those, not all of those companies, but many of those companies use Salesforce as a CRM system. And for the last 10 years, they've pumped data into Salesforce from all different sources. They've pumped them in from their web forms. They've pumped them in from event lists. They pump data in from their sales reps just typing in data. They pumped in data from webinars that they've done and free ebooks that they've provided. And all that data just goes into Salesforce. And then what? Then what? It just has sat there since 2009 and spoiled for 10 years. And nobody's looked at this and gone, hey, what are we going to do about this? Like, the data is just getting bad every year. There are people, obviously, people move on from their jobs, they retire, they get new jobs, they get promoted, they leave and retire. And then companies change. Companies grow, companies shrink. Companies get acquired, they IPO, they get funding, they go out of business, they merge, they divest. All these things are happening at companies, and all of these things are happening at people. And you put data in there 10 years ago that you haven't really done anything with. And that's an insane thing to think. And nobody is really managing all of that data inside Salesforce in an automated, scalable way so that as changes are happening, and they're happening, that they're reflected in your single source of truth. Your single source of truth, your CRM, that people are so proud about telling the world, yes, it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. If it's not, but what are you doing about the data that's in Salesforce? Most people are doing next to nothing about it. And that is a major problem that we solve. We plug right into Salesforce. We keep all of that data up to date, refreshed in real time, so that you know when companies are changing, so that you're getting signals when your point of contact at your biggest account leaves. You're getting notified of that. When the CEO at your top 5 account leaves, you're getting notified of that. When the company that you've been trying to sell for the last 6 months gets a $10 million funding round, you're getting notified of that. In the place you go to market, and whether that's your CRM system, whether it's Salesforce or Dynamics, or HubSpot, whether it's your marketing automation tool like Marketo or Eloqua, we live in those systems that our customers go to market against, and we're feeding all of that data so that when you go, you know what, I want to do an ABM campaign to all of the companies that are current opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry that have grown at least 30% over the last 5 years, and I want to contact their chief information officers, their VPs of IT, and their VPs of information security. That is a seamless task. And if you go ask the vast majority of companies to be able to run a campaign like that, their heads will basically explode.
Mm-hmm.
And that shouldn't be hard.
Well, no, it shouldn't be. And, you paint a compelling picture about how, organizations today who want to be agile and move fast, you're only going to be able to move as fast as your data is accurate. So I think that you paint a very compelling picture.
And I think that concept, I think for many marketers and sales operations people and executives at companies felt far away for a long time. Like having great data in my CRM felt far away. And I think it's just not. It's not that far away. It takes some thinking and some mapping and plugging in ZoomInfo, but it is achievable. And it is the way that 5 years from now, if you're not going to market this way, you will die. That is just, I think, a fact. So and people are doing pieces of this, they're just not doing it in a holistic, thoughtful way.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a lot of people are doing it across a variety of different platforms and piecemealing it together. So this holistic approach is something that, I've got to say, a lot of marketers don't even realize that this exists. And a lot of marketers, like you say, don't really kind of envision how data can be used. I really think the way that data has been packaged and how it can be used, even over the last 2 or 3 years, has changed dramatically. And the amount of segmentation that people can do and to be able to map it back to different behaviors like you were talking about are things that a lot of marketers don't even realize that they can do.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's an abundance of data that is coming from your first party systems, so you can tell who's clicking on links or who's opening emails or who's engaging with the pricing page on your website, but you can't be trapped in the four corners of your website. If that's the only analytic you're getting, there's a whole world out there of things that are happening that should be feeding how you go to market and how you're making decisions about sales territories or marketing campaigns. And if you can't just be trapped by the four corners of your website.
No, and I spent a lot of years in the world of marketing automation, really helping people with both Eloqua and Marketo. And I've got to say that even now, there are a lot of people that just leverage these kind of platforms just to do large email blasts. They're not even using 20% of what these platforms can do now, and to take advantage of the data like you were talking about earlier is really where people need to get to, modern marketers need to get to in the next year or two.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And at least over the last few years, the technology infrastructure has made those types of integrations much easier to leverage. So if you're using ZoomInfo, we have an enriched solution that plugs right into Marketo and right into Eloqua, so you can take advantage of that data in those systems. And those companies have done a nice job of making the systems open, so that companies can get that data where they need it.
Yeah, and I think they've come a long way as well around dashboards and reporting and metrics. So that used to be a big deal, is you had to go onto 6 or 7 platforms just to be able to track your performance on a given campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Attribution is everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I found it interesting, Henry. You've been the CEO of a couple of companies so far, and I think you've really learned a couple of great lessons around making the transition from a starter CEO to a startup CEO. Can you spend a couple minutes talking to our listeners about some of these lessons?
Yeah, absolutely. So today, just for frame, today DiscoverOrg and ZoomInfo it's 1,000 employees across 3 continents and spread across the United States as well. And so that's where we are, where I am today, or what I'm managing today. Obviously, I founded the company, so it was just me and my co-founder at the time. And What I'll tell you is if you're growing, then every stage of the company requires something different. And when we were small, and call small like sub 50 employees, it was just about execution. What sales campaign are you executing? What marketing campaign are you executing this week? What product initiative are you driving this week? And every week you're just, you're juggling those things. And then in the middle of juggling those things, the customer's upset and you have to bring in new business. And so it's just a kind of like you're doing everything. And at 50 employees, actually communication is not a big deal because everybody's kind of around. And so you have a thought or an idea or you're doing something, you can kind of shout it down the hallway and everybody knows. And so getting people on the same page and aligned, it's not that difficult. This is 50 people. It's kind of, you can figure that out. And as the company grows, I read a book when we were like 50 employees called The E-Myth, which is a good book if you're running a small business. And the main concept around the book, and I'm going to butcher it because I haven't read it in a long time, but the way I remember the main concept of that book was become an expert at something, and once you become an expert at something, hire somebody else to do it, and make them an expert at it. And then when you become the expert at the next most important thing in the company, hire somebody to do that, and let them become the expert. And that's kind of how I thought about growing up DiscoverOrg. I became really good at marketing automation. I knew how to do it in Infusionsoft and Pardot and Marketo. And then I decided, you know what? I need somebody to come do this. And I hired somebody. I showed them how it worked. They ran with it. I did all of the sales for the first 2 years. And then I said, look, you can't scale a company if I'm the only person doing the sales. But now I get it. I know the talking points. I know the objections. I know the things customers want to see. I know how to navigate them so they're focused on the right things. Now I'm going to go hire some salespeople to do it too. And I'm going to spread that to scale. And you kind of go through this over and over and over. I think the most important thing to remember during this time is number one, you have to constantly be learning. And so if you're coming into work and doing this, and your company's growing, and you're doing the same thing day in and day out as you did 6 months ago, you're dead. Like, you will not last. The company will outgrow you, and you won't be you will not put yourself in a position to scale. And so today I spent a lot of time, not a lot of time, but I think a lot about, am I listening to the business? The business is going to tell you what it needs. It's going to get pulled. You're going to feel the business going in one direction or another. And if you're not listening to what it's demanding of you, or you're purposely ignoring it because it's not something you're good at, or you don't want to tackle the problem, or the person you have in the role is a good friend of yours, you're dead. You're dead. So listen to the business, constantly change and adapt. Hire great people. That's probably the biggest mistake I made as we grew the organization, is I settled. And look for people who are better than what you think you deserve in your business. And then constantly look for opportunities to get better. And that might be hiring better talent in your organization. That might be coaching up certain talent in your organization. But I think what it needs most is being able to take the pain of what's messed up in your organization and then run right into fixing it. And I do that constantly. And we're having the best year we've ever had. And I just finished a 28-point list of stuff I think we're doing poorly. And I think constantly looking for that edge and constantly looking at the places you can get better, that is critical for any business owner who wants to grow.
You talk about how, facing a point where you needed to bootstrap yourself and continuously learn so that you can evolve to that next level. So you've been in this situation several times. So what are some of the lessons that you've learned on whether or not you should continue bootstrapping, or at what point do you raise money for your startup?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I wanted to bootstrap as long as I possibly could, because obviously the economics are in your favor to do that. And when we brought in TA, it was clear we were growing really fast, and we had an opportunity to continue that growth. But the next stage of the company was going to benefit from having institutional investors on the board, helping us think through acquisitions. We couldn't do any acquisitions if we didn't have private equity investors behind us. That's just like, it would be very difficult to understand how to do diligence, how to line up financing, how to bring in the right lawyers, and especially if you want to do M&A, having outside funding and investors is really important. But I think this question is kind of different for all businesses. We felt like we needed we need institutional investors on the board to help us get to the next stage. And we didn't get to that point until we were at about a $25 million run rate. But that might be different for lots of investors. You may be in a market where market share is everything. You have a really great product, there's a big market, and you want to get to it before your competitors do because it's really competitive. You probably want to bring an institutional investor in soon. If you're in a market that's generally quiet and you have a unique solution and you don't need to grow at all costs, maybe you don't need to bring in an investor. Maybe you can hang on to a bootstrap structure for a bit longer. So it's kind of the same as the first advice. Listen to the business. And if it feels like the business is telling you you need outside investors, then get outside investors. But the thing to not do is go get outside investors because you think that's what a business like yours does. Like that's a bad reason. Or you think that you'll get some notoriety or feel better about your business if some outside investor puts money into it. Don't do it for those reasons. Do it because the business is telling you it needs outside capital or outside guidance.
I wanted to talk a couple minutes, Henry, about customer success because it's such a key component for an organization's growth. I know that DiscoverOrg handles the customer success process a little bit differently than most. Can you spend a few minutes talking about your use of CDRs and how did this process come about?
Definitely. So CDRs it stands for Customer Development Rep. So it's just kind of a play off of an SDR, which is a more widely known role, or a sales development rep. So the way this came about was, it was a random Wednesday afternoon, and I walked past one of our best account managers' offices, and she wasn't doing anything. And she's very good, and she has really important customers. And I said, hey, let me see your calendar. And she pulled up her calendar, and there was nothing on it for the day, maybe one meeting. I was like, oh my God, how I have this really high paid good talent sitting here with nothing on her calendar. And I just said, well, how do I manage this on the account executive side? Because on the account executive side, I'm in the same position. I have a bunch of well-paid, really great sellers. Why do they not look like this? Well, they don't look like that because we're driving appointments onto their calendars every day. And so whether they like it or not, they have work to do. And we're going to fill their calendars so that they're very busy every single day. And I just said, can we do that? Can we do that on a customer success and account management side? Can we layer in this customer development rep to go out, have conversations with the customer, set appointments for the account manager, fill their calendar each day so that our account managers can be having conversations with their clients as often as possible to uncover value and see if there are other ways we can help and check in and do QBRs. And that's what we did. We hired up customer development reps and we said, look, you go and set appointments for these customer success managers at these accounts. And we're going to drive their calendars. So we're getting the most out of our most key employees.
So it sounds like that customer-centric model really enabled you to be able to listen to the business a little bit more closely. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want it. I mean, at the end of the day, we want our salespeople, our customer success managers, our account managers, more than anything, we want them on the phone with our customers. Because they bring a unique perspective, they have an opportunity to really impact these businesses. And so we want them interacting as often as possible with our customers. And so whatever we can do to drive that's the thing.
Very good. Henry, I know we're coming up on time here, but just have one last question for you. If you were to give advice to a CEO who's looking to share their expertise and build their personal brand, what would you tell them?
Be really authentic and vulnerable. Like, I think that to the extent people care to hear from me, it's because I can be authentic about my experience, and I can talk about when things went really poorly and when things went really well. And I think the more you can be your authentic self, the better. You don't need to go out. The world doesn't need 30 more Gary V's. It can use you and your voice and your authentic self. So be as authentic as possible and make it a lot more fun.
Well, that's great advice, and that's the advice that we keep hearing here on the Visible Expert podcast. So thank you for sharing that with us.
My pleasure.
Well, Henry, thank you again for coming on our show. This has been a fantastic interview. My page here is chock full with notes, so Kelly and I have a lot to discuss after this. So thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on.
And if our listeners wanted to learn more about you and DiscoverOrg, where should they go?
They can head over to DiscoverOrg.com or ZoomInfo.com.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, Henry, thank you again for coming on our show.
Yeah.
Thank you, Don.
This has been great. Thanks, Henry.
And that was our interview with Henry Schuck, CEO of DiscoverOrg and now ZoomInfo. So if you found this podcast helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to the show. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, go to your podcast app, up to the top, type in the search bar, The Visible Expert, and scroll on down to the very bottom. Leave us a rating and a review. It really helps. Kelly, any final thoughts before we end our show?
I thought it was interesting, his take on when I asked him the question about are they a branded house or a house of brands. His answer was really kind of a hybrid, that they're in the long term, they want to be a branded house, but he gave some good examples of, during the different acquisitions, how they had to handle each acquisition a little bit differently. The one takeaway I had is, when Henry said, listen to your business. Mm-hmm. To me, that was very powerful, and you can see it in a lot of the decisions that they make. So that's the one real takeaway that I got from it. What about you?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I think if you need to be continuously learning, and growth. I contend that growth happens on the individual level, and then it permeates upward throughout the organization. So I think if you're doing the same thing week over week and you're not learning and you're not growing, then you're dead, like Henry says. So that was the one thing that really stuck with me. So
good.
All right, so for our listeners out there, have a great week, and we'll see you next time on the Visible Expert Podcast. This is John and Kelly signing off.